Welcome to the Rethink Productivity podcast. This is the final episode in our mini-series focusing on MTM. I'm delighted that Ed and Simon are back. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Simon. Hope you're doing okay.
Yeah, welcome back. Thank you. Hi, Simon.
Hello, Simon.
Welcome back for the final one. So, final episode. Hopefully, we've kept it as simple as possible for those that have been following. Really interesting subject and topic. And we're going to finish on using MTM to improve methods, not just set time. So I'll kind of work these between the both of you because I know you've both got some points you want to talk about. So if we start with you, Simon, I think we've touched on this in episode 1 and 2, but using MTM as a method improvement tool, not just to generate times for budgeting systems or line balancing or whatever. What are your thoughts on how that works and what do you see?
Yeah, so as we've mentioned in the previous podcasts, MTM is a great tool to be able to give us answers to business cases quite quickly and quite cheaply. So if we imagine we've got a logistics setup, we've got a packing bench, and we've got all our tools and accessories all laid out to do our job. We can look at ways of improving and see what the impact would be simply by moving things closer, making things easier to reach. So, MTM will look at distances up to 80 centimetres in distance for a reach. If you think we're having to do that a lot of times, 100 times a day, there could be an ergonomic risk there. So that'll help on that. And then we can look at what the impact would be by moving it closer together. What's the time saving? Does that make life easy? We can also look at maybe how the tape would be dispensed. So maybe that they've got pre-cut pieces of tape on a sheet of paper, but they want to look at having tape on a roll that they can pull to length and cut off. So we can look at the impact of how those are, and then we can look at how much the new equipment would cost versus the time saving that it's going to give us, and then we'd be able to come up with a business case for that. And that'll follow the suit all the way through, and that can look at the amount of times we have to walk from point A to point B and return back. Or it could be things about how easy or difficult positioning is. So it could be, if we change the way something is built and we put a chamfer around a hole, will that have an impact on the positioning? Will that make it easier for us? If it does, what's the cost of putting that chamfer in, and what's the time saving based on the making of the positioning easier to be done? So we can look at that. We can then weigh up when we exponentially move that up hundreds, thousands of times, and then we can work out what the cost versus benefit is.
Good. So again, I'll just reiterate the point, get into lots of detail, do lots of creative what-if model scenario without having to build the layout or synthesize it somewhere in a mock shop. Yeah. And Ed, you've done some real-life stuff based on layouts and process improvements using MTM, I believe?
Yeah, so we use it in quite a few projects now in terms of being able to identify those methods and how to improve upon it. It's baked into the entire sort of ethos of what MTM is. So it is methods, time, measurement. It's based on the method determines the time. Your time is a result of the method. It's not you go and time something and the time's the time. It all will feed back to the method. Your code should describe a method that can be followed by an operator at the end of the day. So having that ability to look at your code and say, well, this is the method that is currently in place. We can then, as Simon mentioned, start to look at things and say, well, what if we changed where this tool's placed? What if one of the examples was making pizzas in supermarkets. It was, okay, so well, this is how all of the toppings are set out at the moment and laid out. There's no sort of real rhyme or reason to the layout. It is just however the colleague wants to do it. We say, well, great. Now what happens if we look at the top selling pizzas for the locations and put the best selling toppings closer to the operator? What does that do to the timings if that's the most popular pizza that's being sold? Lo and behold, you get a time benefit out of that because you're not reaching 40 centimetres to get some salami or pepperoni for your pizza. You're now reaching 20. So it's little things like that it can be really helpful for.
And In terms of layout, it's always, I suppose, that the holy grail for people is to work through any challenges before they roll it out en masse to the restaurant, wherever it might be. Again, you've used MTM to look at new layouts, proof of concept layouts, Ed, to see what that might be telling them and where there's room for even more efficiency or productivity gains before they roll it out to a wider estate.
Yeah, one of the things that we've seen recently is actually you can introduce a new layout, but you need to make sure that you introduce a new method to go along with that layout. Otherwise, you don't see any benefit from it particularly, which sort of always comes back to the first point on this podcast. We've also used it for, it's not just in layouts, but in technology. So you introduce touch screens into a process. What does that do versus a keyboard? For some of the activities, it was, well, the touch screens are a little bit slower, but actually you get a gain from being able to do smaller activities easier on the screen rather than needing to use a mouse to drag a cursor somewhere, almost like using a tablet. And it also showed with that one the differences people knowing keyboard shortcuts can make on a PC versus having to go the long way round. So that was an interesting one of you introducing new layouts, new systems, but there's probably things that exist within the business at the moment that you could identify with MTM and take forward and use that as the standard method before you even look at some of these layout trends.
Yeah, makes sense. And Simon, I assume that applies as you kind of move down into workstations in automotive manufacturing and other areas too.
Yeah, we had a good example actually where we were approached by a client to have a look at their warehouse layout. So they were traditionally picking the pallets up out of their manufacturing part of the business from 4 different locations. And what they wanted to do is have a centralized conveyor belt feeding into the warehouse. So they just had one pickup location within the warehouse. They felt that this was going to give them a massive time saving in putting away the pallets into the racking. We went in and did an MTM analysis for them and actually identified it was only a 7-second saving, which wasn't anywhere near the saving that they thought they were going to receive. However, as we noticed that there was an activity happening that was outside of the scope of the project, but we still decided to analyse, and that was the fact that the new layout allowed for all different sizes of pallets, whereas the old layout, it was a pallet size specific per pickup location. And the benefit then meant is they didn't have to decant some pallets to fit some of the client requirements. So actually, based on a full articulated lorry load of pallets, there was a potential 2.5 hour saving purely on not having to decant pallets down. So that was a great piece of news for them, which they weren't expecting. So it's not just about poor layouts, it's about other methods that can be derived there as well. So that was a particularly good one that actually it didn't achieve what they were expecting it to achieve, but it did from something outside of the scope.
Excellent. And from an employee's point of view, are there any concerns, Simon, you typically get challenged with or you have to address from using MTM as a methodology?
Yeah, I think people have always fear of the times that are derived being used as a sort of a bit of a beating tool. They're not. They're just a way really for the management to understand how long the process takes, so they can allocate the right amount of resources, they can cost to the client correctly, and they can also make sure that the line is balanced correctly as well. So quite often the employees will slow down or speed up when they know they're being watched. The benefit there for MTM is we're not bothered how quickly or how slowly they're working, because we will literally just code on what we see, and that is the distance they're reaching, the influencing factors with regards to grasp, how far they're moving it, and where they're positioning it to. So, and these will all have uniform times. So the benefit there is actually if you do have people that are nervous or skeptical about being monitored or being analysed, then MTM is a good tool for that, because it normalises the actions and the time, because it's not based on rating or anything like that.
Perfect. And Ed, have you got any examples of acceptance or concerns that people have that you've come across?
Probably one of the best examples of it was with a client that I spoke to a couple of years ago, and it wasn't where they were working currently, but it'd been where they'd been in contact with MTM in previous jobs. And they were, to get the acceptance, they would go in, do the recording, do the coding. They'd go away, they'd work it all through, and they would present the method that they've come up with from the watching the videos and doing the coding. They'd give that method to the operator and say, right, we've coded it, we worked it through. Can you try it in this way of working? And by doing that, you can get the employee or the operators buy-in, because it gives them a chance for almost instant feedback. If you're not introducing a new layout or you're just changing the method, it soon highlights where you've changed things because you think they'd be more effective, but actually has a unattended sort of a knock-on effect that you weren't necessarily going to have foreseen when the operator, when they come to do it, all of a sudden spots it. So they were getting the buy-in that way of actually doing multiple codes and tweaks with the operator's input, so that the operator felt like they had a bigger stake in the process than potentially they would do if they were just given a method and given a layout and been told to complete a task. And it comes back again to what's at the core of MTM, is it's about a better method for the individual who's completing the process. And the result of that is the times go down or your output goes up. It's not about taking the output and the times and using them to steer the process. It all stems from that. You want the best method for that operator to complete so they can do the best job possible and you get the output you want.
Excellent. We'll finish question for you both again. So again, we'll just continue with you, Ed. So MTM supporting continuous improvement and standard work. I think we've touched on some of that, but have you got anything else to add there?
Because you're at that level of detail, if you are making any changes to the process, there is almost a necessity to go back and look at that coding. So you almost get that continuous improvement every time you're going to make a change. You'll go back, look at the coding again. Being able to standardize the work, you're looking at the codes, they'll be easily sort of you'll be able to replicate them easily between colleagues because they're at that level of detail. There's not much ambiguity in there. So that all helps within sort of standardizing processes where potentially they're not standardized beforehand. Otherwise, I think it's just, again, it's part of MTM, part of the way that you train to think is always about what can I change, what can I make better. So it is just embedded in the process that you go through as you code in a video.
And Simon, your finishing thoughts on?
So finishing thoughts, yeah. I think for me, any business should explore the option to use MTM within their workplace to not only gain times, but to look at continuous improvement within the business. Certainly when you've got repeatable tasks, very, very useful. It can work alongside your Lean and Six Sigma methodologies. It can also be integrated into a lot of different software options as well. So certainly very utilizable. And if you don't want to invest in any software, it can work perfectly well on Excel spreadsheets as well. So very, very easy to do. As I say, it will help move your business forward quite quickly, I think. And the investment of just a couple of weeks worth of training, I think it's certainly something any business should look for.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. Really appreciate your thoughts and time on all 3 episodes. If people want to find out more, then you can visit the UK MTM website, which we'll put a link through in the show notes, or the Rethink website, or you can find myself, Ed, or Simon Woodfield on LinkedIn. And again, we'll put all our profiles on there, and always happy to talk all things MTM and find the right methodology that works for you to deliver the outputs you're looking for. Just leaves me to say thank you, Ed, once again, and thank you, Simon, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.